Okay, we are ready to start then. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the 10th Zoom lecture of the 60th Public Lecture Series of the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. It is my pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Beatrice Pestarino, postdoctoral fellow at the Haifa Center for Mediterranean History of Haifa University. After a BA and an MA in Classical Philology and Ancient History from the University of Pisa in 2015, Beatrice Pestarino obtained a PhD in Ancient Greek History from University College London in 2021 under the supervision of Hans van Wees and Paola Ceccarelli. The politico-administrative and economic systems of the Mediterranean city-states during the Archaic, Classical and Hellenistic periods, with a major focus on Cyprus and ancient mobility investigated through travelers' graffiti and marks, especially in remote landscapes, are amongst her research interests. She is currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Haifa Center for Mediterranean History of the University of Haifa, where she has been carrying out research on the connections between Cyprus and the Levant during the Archaic period in the 8th to 6th centuries BC, and analyzes the Levantine magistrates who may have ruled over some of the Cypriot city kingdoms. At the University of Haifa, she is also a member of the Mitzpe Shifta Archaeological Project, where she edits and translates Greek inscriptions and graffiti found on the site, probably a Byzantine monastery of the 6th century AD. She was also a fellow at the Center for Hellenic Studies at Harvard University, where she undertook research on the early Hellenistic strategia in Cyprus. In the spring of 2022, she was a visiting fellow of the Cruz Project, Contexts of and Relations Between Early Writing Systems at the University of Cambridge, where she studied the introduction of the Greek alphabet in Cyprus. She taught classics at the London Summer School in Classics, organized by the Department of Greek and Latin at UCL, and has delivered classes of ancient Greek language at Royal Holloway, University of London, as a visiting tutor. Her first monograph, Kyprion Politia, The Political and Administrative Systems of the Classical Cypriot City Kingdoms, published with Leiden Brill in 2022, won the Cyprus Review Award 2023 in History and Political Science and a book prize in Ancient Greek History from the Istituto Italiano per la Storia Antica. From May 2024, she will be a Leverhulme Early Career Fellow at the University of Liverpool, working on the project Rethinking Regionalism and Power in Hellenistic Cyprus. Closing this introduction, I would like to kindly ask all our participants to keep their cameras off and their microphones muted. Should you wish to address a question or comment to our speaker, feel free to use the chat button on Zoom. You may also switch on your cameras after the end of the presentation to address your question directly to the speaker by raising your hand and unmuting your microphone. So, dear Beatrice, we very much look forward to hearing all about the political and administrative systems of the classical Cypriot city kingdoms. Thank you very much.
Great. So thank you so much, Thanasis. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see if you can see it.
Yes, it might take a few seconds. Here it is. Can you set it on full screen, please?
Yes, just a few seconds and you... Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So, first of all, I would like to thank Professor Bionis and Professor Maria Iacovu, who gave me the possibility to be and to be here and present part of my research today. The book Kyprion Politeia is quite long, so I would have loved to discuss with the audience the topics covered inside, but I had to So today we are going to speak about a possible reconstruction of parts of political and administrative systems, looking at the core of the administration of the polities, so at archives and scribes in the fourth part of the talk, and questioning the existence of other bodies of government behind Cypriot kings in the second part of the talks. So I decided to start, as I started the book, with a quotation, Stat rosa pristina nomine, nomina nuda tenemus. So the old rose remains only its name, we possess bare names. So the quotation comes from the famous Umberto Eco's novel, The Name of the Rose. So these few words outline effectively the problem that we face when we try to reconstruct the political administrative systems of Cyprus in the classical period. Literary sources provide very minimal information on the subject, and we stand with a handful of nomina nuda, so bare names, in our hands. But here too, there is a lost manuscript that would be extremely interesting to read. So this is not, however, the second book of Aristotle's Poetics, as in the novel, but one of the several constitution, or better, Politeiae, written by Aristotle or by one of the members of his school. So the Kuprion Politeia, so the Cypriot political system. So the lexicon of Arpocasio and Alexander Marian of the 2nd century AD mentions it. It says that in Cyprus, the sons and the brothers of the king were called Anactes, and his sister and his wife were called Anasai. So they appear in the lexicon as a peculiarity of the island. It's confirmed by descriptions, as you can see here. So the Suda, a large 10th century AD encyclopedia, provides another nomen nudum. So under the entry Tiera, the author notes that Theophrastus wrote a treatise on the Cypriot kingship, so Peri Basileias Kuprion. So evidently, the Cypriot political administrative structure attracted the curiosity of Greek philosophers and historians, particularly in the Aristotelian circles. But what was the Politeia of the Cypriots, and why did they really interest? What was the political administrative system of Cyprus during the classical period? Were there other officials and magistrates beyond the Basileus and the Anactes and the Anasai? How did the system develop over the centuries? So let's see if we can reply at least to some of these questions. The paucity of literary sources forces us to look at other testimonies, such as descriptions that, as we all know, were written in several languages and our writing system. So Cypriot-syllabic Greek, alphabetic Greek, Cypriot-syllabic Ethio-Cypriot, Phoenician, implied by Cypriot governments and inhabitants, which made Cyprus a multilingual environment. This raises a further questions. So since the governments of the Cypriot city-states adopted different languages in their administrations and decrees, did they share a similar political administrative systems, or were they substantially different? And if so, in what ways? So let's proceed in order. So the most productive city kingdom in terms of passing on to us officials who were employed in the government beyond the figure of the king is Kition. Almost all of the officials attest in the Kition Phoenician text bear the title of chief rab, which implies that they were in charge of a number of subordinates. Some of these rab were probably employed in a palatial administration and administrative environment. So among them, we have the Rab Soferim, the chief of scribes, which is the most frequent title. It says that 3 times in Kition, on a funerary stele from the necropolis of Agios Georgios Nemata, in a dedicatory inscriptions to the good moon, dedicated by Abdu, son of Kilikai. This Abdu, son of Kilikai, is quite interesting because we have also an Abdu, son of Kilikai, quoted inside of the Italian Ostraca, as we're going to see soon, but of course we are not sure if it was the same person or not. Found in Kiti.
Beatrice, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I ask you to switch your camera off because your internet connection is not very strong? By switching your camera off might ease things with the sound. Excellent, thank you. Just your camera, yeah. We can't hear you now. Your microphone is off. Κωνσταντίνε.
Ναι, εντάξει.
Okay, thank you. So it was telling me they couldn't switch on the microphone.
Okay.
Thank you. We were saying that description with dedicating by Abdu, son of Kilikai, was found in Kiti. And then we also have the Rab Soferim, in another famous inscriptions, so in the accounts supposedly belonging to the local temple of Astarte found in Kition, so the famous Kition tariff. So for reasons of space and time, it is not possible to read all the sources. So to demonstrate that the scribe and chief of scribes may have been employed in the palace of Kition and not in the temple of Astarte, as originally believed, it is sufficient to look at last document cited, so the Kition tariff. So it is a list of accounts dated to the 5th century BC, a gypsum tablet found on Bambora Hill. It's painted with black ink on two sides, A and B, and damage in the lower part of face A. The first word of face A, taklit, sum or total, proves that this is an accounting document with a list of expenses and payments to workers related to an administration. So we have Abdou Nejmoun, who receive a reward, 3 kofrash and kofpaf alaf, apparently, for having worked for the institution as a chief of scribes. So we have here line 15a, as you can see in red, which mentioned the chief of scribes, and he reads, for Abdou Nejmoun, chief of scribes, sent off on this day 3 kofrash and kofpaf alaf. So the presence of scribes is not surprising in an institutional environment, in particular if you consider that their work is related to a palace or to a temple. Where the scribe work and to prove that he was an administrative official. So Antoine Hermary has been the first person to put a question mark on the nature of the document. For years, this tablet has been considered the most important evidence for male and female sacred prostitution on the island related to the cult of Astarte Aphrodite. In its initial publication, it was immediately related to the temple of Astarte, since the temple is mentioned in line 4a, as you can see here. So for the architects who built the temple of Astarte in Kition, one Kofpaf Aleph. So all the other people listed in the tablet were considered employees of the temple, such as magistrate of the new moons, barbers, singers, functionaries, artisans, sacrificers, slaves, shepherds, and so on. In lines 15a, and then we're going to see later in 10b, we have Kalebim, dogs, are mentioned, along with Gualgurim, so lions. So 4 dogs and small lions, 3 kofrash and 3 pefal. Scholars interpreted these dogs and lions as references to male prostitutes. So the term gurin literally indicates lions, lion cubs, but scholars have preferred to translate it as cats in analogy with the dogs mentioned before. So in the Corpus Inscriptionum Significarum, you will consider scorta virilia, so the equivalent of the Greek hieroduloi, so young boys who practice sacred prostitution associated with Aphrodite's and Venus temple, as well as with Near Eastern Astarte and Astarte cult. However, as Marie suggested, a new perspective in reading the accounts should be considered in view of the discovery of the royal palace and its archive, or at any rate an important administrative building in Italian Amplieri by the costly excavation. Okay. So in most cases, the more than 700 ostraca and tablets found in the palace present accounts and list of expenses similar to those of the Titan tablet, or related to the local administration. Written Phoenician, the administrative language of Italian, after it was conquered by Kition, but around about 30 are written in Cypriosyllabic Greek. Although most of these documents are still unpublished, Amadasi and Zamora Lopez have analyzed their content, and according to them, the text may be dated from the 4th, 3rd century BC, and the administrative and economic organization that they reveal did not substantially change over the years from the Achaemenids to the early Hellenistic periods. This ostraca also shows lists of anthroponyms, Phoenicians or Greek transliterated in Phoenician script, preceded by the preposition lamed to, as in the list of accounts from Kition. So according to Amadasi, the men listed in the documents were workers or officials paid by the administration. So in the accounts from Kition, almost all the personnel employed and paid may be associated to either palace or temple. But what confirmed the reference to the temple was the presence of the hieroduloi, the dogs and small lions. However, according to Marie, we should read them simply as common animals, used to protect the palace along with garrison or used for hunting. Marie suggested that we can suppose that the Calebim were actual dogs, probably used even before the Ptolemaic period in Kition for defending the palace or for hunting. So they were a major expense, one worth recording in the accounts. It's just they were kept in London. And for more information on dogs, I refer you either to the book or to Hermarie's article published in 2014. But Hermarie doesn't speak about lions, about the Kurim. So what about the lions? So lions are a widespread image in Near Eastern iconography, as well as in Greece, a symbol of royal power and authority. So they appear in Cyprus on coins, on funerary monuments, and one of the most frequent seafood iconography subject is the master of the animals, so master of the lions. This is represented through limestone statuette dated to the 7th, 5th century BC, holding a club in the right hand and a miniature lion on the left. According to accounts, the master combines two different iconographic traditions related to the lion. So he recalls the Near Eastern Egyptian lion hunt, and at the same time, he has the lion skin of Heracles. So keeping lions in palaces was a common practice spread in the Near East, as well as in Greece. So looking at the Persephone reliefs, the Elamites offered to the great kings lion cubs, among other animals, for example. Moreover, a passage from Herodotus describes the fight between a lion cub and a puppy dog in the Persian royal palace. As has been suggested by Halden, lion cubs were probably raised in the palace as a symbol of royal authority or to be hunted. In Greek literature, Thucydides in the Iliad describe the kidnapping of lion cubs or the attempt to kidnap them. So lion whelps also occur in Similes in other Greek literary texts. In Aeschylus, Agamemnon, an partial lion cub, which grew up in a family whose members erroneously interpreted its attitude as a sign of meekness. So we may assume that even in a Greek environment, the practice of keeping tame lion was known. So in conclusion, tame lion cubs could live in a palace, probably live in a palace. As they are mentioned along with dogs in the Kition accounts, they could both have been employed in the hunt or kept as tame animals. In any case, they were probably related to the palace environment and were not male prostitutes employed in the temple. So accordingly, the chief of scribes mentioned in the text was probably also a palace rather than a temple official. Okay. To understand why the temple of Astarte is mentioned in the tablet, and to further prove that the expenses were related to a palace environment instead of the temple, one should look again at the very recent overview of the state of research of the Phoenician ostraca from the Palace at Idalion by Amadasi and Zamora Lopez. So in some of these administrative ostraca, places of worship and religious ceremonies are mentioned, along with the Marzah related to Astarte and Melkart. Some of these ostraca may thus present palace expenditure on cult organization. Similarly, the temple of Astarte, mentioned the Khiton tablet, is not necessarily the location where the records were made and kept, but could have been one of the several religious institutions to which the palace made payment, or the royal government made payments for maintenance. This is even more plausible if one considers that political and religious authority overlap in Cyprus, and therefore the government may plausibly have been in charge of cult organization. Moreover, looking at the Khiton tablet, it may be noticed that Astarte is not the only divinity mentioned in the list. Along with paying for the architects who built the temple, palace administration also paid for 20 artisans who built pillars in the temple of Mikal. And we have those in line 13. So, therefore, the Rabbs of Erim, so the chief of scribes, may have been employed in the local palace or local administrative building. So the presence of a chief of scribes involved the existence of a body of scribes subject to his control. This may also be confirmed by an ostracon of white well-made pottery, which provides lists of anthroponyms and accounts, in all likelihood related to an administrative system and coming from Khiton. And this ostracon also has the same typology that we see in the of accounts that we see in the Khiton tariff and also in the Italian ostraca. So in line 3, Iona and Madasi have been able to read Soferim. So scribes. So to conclude, the presence of a chief of scribes and scribes is attested in Khiton during the classical period. But what about the other city kingdoms? So Idalion and Khiton show the same recording system in the accounts of the local palaces. Although the Idalian archive is dated to the 4th century BC, when the Khitans had already conquered the city-state, it is quite implausible that in a few years the Khitan completely changed the previous administrative system and established a new one similar to that used in Khiton. It's more plausible that the Idalian palace had an administrative system already similar to that of the Khitan before the Khitan's dominations, and this system may have been common in the island. So, a recent investigation of the administrative citadel of Palais Paphos Kuklia, conducted by Professor Maria Iacobu, may confirm this hypothesis. So he brought to light an ostracon with accounts of better-term logistic entries, since the St. Husdens is listed 3 times, written through the Paphian syllabary, dated to the late 4th century BC. So the document is very similar to the ostraca from Idalion in Khiton. So in the Paphian ostracon, the item is listed as a logogram T, as you can see here, an effective accounted method which was common to numerous writing systems and, as Iacobu and Carnava pointed out, also used in encomi and Cypriot-Minoan accounts. So the same logogram T, very likely an abbreviation, is attested in the Cypriot syllabic document on a list from the Italian archive. A list in one of them has been published in 2008 by Hermary. You find it here on the right side. So you can see to the man in charge of the ball pins, 4 me and 3 te. And then we have salary in the verses. So this may demonstrate that the Paphian palace might have had an account system similar, an accounting system similar to that of the Idalian one. So other Cypriot city-states may have a similar administrative system, so also with scribes specialized in recording accounts of the palace. An ostracon, probably coming from the palace of Amatus and dated to 525 BC, bears accounts written in black ink in Cypriot syllabary, and this document is also similar to those coming from Paphos and Idalion. Furthermore, in the palace of Amatus, excavations brought to light a cretula with an impressed seal that you have here. So the cretula was accidentally fired. It kept on the back the shape of the perishable material that sealed it, and the channel left by the cord, then circular roll, likely a papyrus roll. So this find attests to the presence of written documents rolled and sealed in amatus and perhaps also stored in an archive. So the epitaph of Marion, dated to the 6th century BC, shows the name of Onesagora, son of Stasacora, Totipetera in genitive case, so the diphthera. So this term is a Cypriot Greek apax. The term diphthera is also used to describe a register or a tablet, leather prepared as writing material, or simply a writing tablet, account book. So Diodorus records a fragment of Thesias, which mentions Achaemenid royal documents called Basilicae Diphtherae, accounts which probably narrate court events. So an example of diphtherae, later documents employ the administration of the periphery of the Achaemenid Empire, are the letters of the satrap Arshama from Egypt, recently edited by Taplin and Ma. So therefore, the Mayan diphthera lephos have recorded accounts or letters in leather related to the palace and the court. So, all in all, the presence of specialized scribes, as the diphthera lephos is, for example, in Marion, and the chief of scribes and its subjects, as in Kition, employed in the palace, and accounts and dispenses from palaces, accounts which bear a similar layout throughout the city, Kition, Indalion, Alepaphos, and maybe also Amatus, just that the city kingdoms may have similarities in the administration of the palaces and archives, and at least some of them may have adopted similar recording systems. So, and now we can move to the second part of the talk, so the political system. Okay. So the Cypriot political system, in contrast to the administrative one, seems to have undergone more changes. The analysis of magistracies shows that some offices or body of governments were peculiar to certain city-states and not widespread on the island. And remarkably, the some developed during the 5th, 4th century BC. So let's start again with an example from Kition. In Kition, an epitaph dated to the 4th century BC attests to the presence of a Sufat. So this is a woman, so we are not sure about the name of the woman, Tad maybe, daughter of Abduneshmun, the Sufat, wife of Germelkart, son of Benadesh, son of Germelkart, son of Ashmunazar. So according to Amadasi's onomastic analysis, Germelkart may be the name of a representative of the Kitan upper class, along with Abdu-Eshmun, so the only Sufat attested on the island until now. It is rather unusual text since we have a very few other Phoenician inscriptions that mention this office. One is from Tyre, which shows that the office could be hereditary, and another one is from Piraeus, both dated to the 3rd century BC. By contrast, several Punic and Neo-Punic inscriptions show a substantial presence of Sufetim from the end of the 4th century BC onwards. So literary texts demonstrate that the position of Sufat was a common magistracy in Canaanite polities, where the Sufat had a judicial office, so it worked basically as a judge. But may also become a leader and a ruler of his community instead of the milk of the king, especially in the archaic period. But the Kitan Sufat probably held a slightly different role during the 4th century BC, also considering that kings are always were attested in classical Kition. According to Rosenberg and Manfredi, so the Sufetim's role evolved from a generic office of judge to specific public magistrate. This is evident in the East Mediterranean as well as in the Punic War, where the Sufetim became the annual eponymous magistrate, as inscriptions demonstrate. In a bilingual Greek-Phoenician document from Turbunica, for example, dated to the 2nd, 4th century BC, the term Sufat has been translated into Greek with the noun archon. So this proves that the two titles could overlap, perhaps because they were both annual offices. So this may suggest that the link between the suffect and an eponymous magistrate that we know is attested in the Italian bronze tablet and maybe also in the Bauer tablet, but this is more controversial, who had an office similar to the Greek eponymous Archon and were appointed for 1 year. So the Carthaginian Suffetim had office for 1 year too. So these Suffetim were members of rich families, part of the local elites, among whom they were elected. Considering all this stuff, the Citian suffect was also a member of the upper class appointed for 1 year. But what interesting has more? So according to Manfredi, the evolution of the role of the Suffetim developed with that of the Am people in Phoenician and Punic inscriptions, when Am started acting as an assembly, or at least is a deliberative body and not simply as the people. So such an evolution is not surprising, since the presence of assemblies and council is long-standing even in the Near East. It is worth mentioning again the passage of the Assyrian Annals, which concerns the agreement between Encharaddon and Baal of Tyre. So the elders probably gather in a council, and the king brought both parties to agree. So Manfredi argues that in the Levantine city-state, the popular assembly may have played a similar role. In some area of the Mediterranean, Suffetim were part of the popular assembly, A clear instance comes from the West Punic word in the form of an inscription from Antas, and you have here on the upper part on the right of the slide, dated to the 3rd century BC. So according to Manfredi, those Suffetim were elected by Ham, to which they belong. But when did the term started to designate not just the people, but an assembly of the people, which perhaps may elect its representatives? A 5th century inscriptions from Bliblo might help to better understand when the transition took place. So it is a dedication written by the Milk, Yev Milk, whose reign is usually dated about 450 BC to the Lady of Byblos. The text, of course, on the left is taken from the Corpus Inscriptionum Simiticarum. So the text describes the temple and the objects dedicated to the divinity by the king. So line 10 and 11 bear as centers governed by a verb, which means he gave, and then 2 sequences that you have here in red and then in blue. So Elahi convincingly proposed a translation of the first part, so the first sequence, the one that you have here in red, as in favor of the side of the gods and of the people, population, of this land. And of the second part that you have here in blue, as the assembly of the people of this territory, so the civic territory. This was quite an interesting interpretation because before Elahi's interpretation, the second part, the blue one, was considered a mistake by the inscriber, just a typographic error, let's say. So according to Elahi's reading, this inscription seems to differentiate the Am people from the Am assembly of people. So if so, this document would be the terminus ante quem for the appearance of Am as assembly of people in the Phoenician text, and would stress the transition from one use of Am to the other. And let's see, okay. So, according to both the Levantine state started to open up to more republican institutions beyond the king, mostly in the classical period. To further prove this, Elahi also mentions a change in the legend of the Byblos coins, which gain a more republican aspect over the years. So some of them bear only Gimel, so interpreted as the population of Byblos, or just Gimel, so simply Byblos, as they do not feature the tall milk any longer, and also the name of the king, of course, as Xerxes' coins did, although they were minted when the king Enulos ruled over the city. So similar instances may come from the coins of Idalion and Curion, and we're going to have a surprise soon, I think, probably also Kutroi, all dated to the classical period. So here on the right, you have the example with the coins from Gibrol that they have in the legend Gimel and Lamed. And then you have in the center the coins from Curion that you have here with the ko, typical of the Curion. And then on the right, you have Italy from Italian. Okay. So let's see if it changes the slide. Okay, it did. So the transitions of from people to acted as a deliberative body may have occurred in Cyprus too. So the term appears in the famous trophy of Milkiation dated to the beginning of the 4th century BC. So its text states that the whole population of Kition erected the monument along with the king. So likely the agreed to erect the trophy perhaps after a consultation in an assembly, so we don't know. In any case, there will be another instance in which the population of a Cyprus city-state took an active part in decisions which concern the wall quality. The Idalian bronze tablet provides the other striking example. So a convincing parallelism exists between Pasileuse, Case, Apoteliese, Italiose, so the king and the city of the Idalians. Of course, as you probably know, so the bronze tablet concerned the donations by King Statichropos and Idalians to Onasilos and his brothers, so physicians who cured the Idalians after a siege perpetrated by the Kytians and held by the Achaemenids. The donation of silver talents, and after this converted into plot of lands. We were saying that a convincing parallelism exists between the formula that we have in the Idalian bronze tablet and the formula of the Milkiation trophy that you have here on the right. So which state the king of Kition, Idalion, and the whole population of Kition. So the formula, the king of Kition, Idalion, the whole population of Kition occurs several times in descriptions as the formula Pasileuse, Case, Apotolis, Italiose does in the bronze tablet. So this shows a striking parallelism between the political systems of Kition and that of Idalion when the city-state was still independent. So two separate city-states, Idalion and Kition, thus may share a political system, although they adopted different languages in their administration. But while were more republican institutions introduced during the classical period in the Levantine area and in Cyprus, so Elahi suggested that this phenomenon was due to the influence of the Greek poleis. So according to Snisser and Young, the republican tone of trophies was due to the Greek character of the wall inscription. So the practice of erecting a trophy is itself a Greek habit. However, there may be an equally valid additional reason for the development of more republican institutions during the classical period. So Manfredi and Elahi, in later works, argue that the principal cause of the development of more republican bodies in the Phoenician city-state was the reform of the Achaemenid administration. At the beginning of the 5th century BC, the administrative system of Achaemenid peripheral territories was restructured in order to reorganize the collection of taxes. According to Manfredi, this Achaemenid reform would have reinforced the powers of local areas under the umbrella of the empire and of their inhabitants, through whom the Persians controlled the forest collection. So she also argued that at a later time, a new consolidation phase of the developed republican institutions was established thanks to Alexander's arrival and the consequent deeper Hellenization of the institutions. So the Achaemenid rule caused a significant change in the political administrative framework of both the center and the periphery of the empire. As Near Eastern and Greek literary sources testify. So Greek authors mentions Darius as the greatest Achaemenid reformer. So although Greek sources are historically not entirely reliable, and particularly Herodotus, as they may and more inconsistent, it is clear that they testify to an important change. So according to recent studies by Kleber, the document found in the Persepolis archive also reflects such a change. So because of Darius' reform, all the private lands and urban properties, including those of the center of the empire, became part of a tax scheme. So this triggered the rebellions of taxed people and owners, so members of the upper class as well. Plausibly, in order to quell similar riots in peripheral areas and to balance local powers, Achaemenids may have looked favorably at the development of more republican institutions at the expenses of local sovereigns. So the development of republican bodies could also counterbalance the powers of local kings, satraps, or governments, thus ensuring a better stability throughout the territory. And I provided here some examples of Herodotus, where in some way he wants to tell us that there was this debate among the Persians about which kind of formal government would have been better to adopt. So furthermore, the introduction of more republican institutions was not entirely unfavorable to local kings and governors. From the 5th century BC, in the Levantine city-state, and probably in Cyprus too, the power of the sovereigns partially decreased in favor of the upper class. So in Cyprus, striking evidence comes from the origins of the most famous kings on the island, Evagoras, king of Salamis, and Minkiation, king of Kition, whose fathers were never kings, as inscriptions and literary sources testify. So they were members of the upper class who competed for power. So their non-hereditary power base might have the support not only of the state, but of the population too. So the establishment of more republican institutions may also have helped the sovereign to win the favor of the people. So both literary sources and epigraphic attestations provide information with respect to this political scenario. For example, Isocrates states that palace conspiracies among members of the elite were an everyday occurrence. So we might mention the famous Phoenician refugee who gained the throne at the expenses of a local Samian. In turn, this refugee, once had gained power, was dethroned by one of the dynasty who governed with him. So although Isocrates' account is not entirely reliable, it's plausible that influential quarters existed, perhaps among those who appear in the descriptions of the Khitian court or in the ostraca of the Italian archive, such as, for example, the King's Man. They are attested in Italian. Finally, and I'm going toward the talk, I wanted to speak about these inscriptions because it's been chosen as the cover of this poster, although it's a bit more controversial in my opinion than the trophy of Minkiation and the Italian bronze tablet. So finally, in other inscriptions might reveal the existence of similar political institutions in other Cypriot city kingdoms. This is a decree promulgated by a king, Cretes of Curion, and the document is dated to 450 BC. So there are scholars who say that this Cretes may be a Stasicrates mentioned by Herodotus related to the fact of the Ionian revolt. It may have been, but we are not sure about this. It is written, and this is interesting, with a mix of a common syllabary. For example, the sign ko is written according to the traditional syllabic system, and the direction of writing goes from right to left, as in the common syllabary. An archaic inscription from the sanctuary of Rantidi that's been recently published by Carnava, sanctuary located on the border between the territories of Curion and Paphos, and inscription probably written by Curians, shows a similar paleographical feature. It also speaks about the god of the Curians, which is going to be interesting for our discussion later. So the decree from Curion, written in Stankedon, so this one, consists of 3 lines, and the first part of the decree is translating as the king of Curion, Cretes, son of Stasi, etc. So the second part of the descriptions uses the term tamoterone, so a noun adjective probably related to the noun damos, people. According to Egetmeyer, the suffix teron, so terone, is a plural genitive and has an independent value, not comparative. We also have the same suffix in some Mycenaean tablets in Vanacatero, I think, related to the territory of the land of the Vanaks. So tamoterone can be translated as those who belong to the people, as Egetmeyer has proposed. The word etemi has been interpreted as a sigmatic aorist of the verb temizo and translated as decided. So the whole sequence might mean, so the king, Cretes, let's say, decided these things on behalf of those who are of the people. Lejeune propose identifying here the king Cretes as subject of the verb etemi, pointing out that although the sovereign established these things, so the decision may have been taken by mutual agreement with the population or perhaps with the representatives of the local population. So Cassio compared the content of the Curian inscriptions, of these inscriptions, with a verse of Aratus phenomena, and he states that in the archaic past, Aphrodite, called Lyke, used to sing temistas, normal for the people. So Cassio argued that the archaizing terminology of Aratus, so damoteras temistas, was not coincidental, but corresponding to an ancient terminology, very likely preserved in Cyprus, and shown in the Curion text, where temis, temizo, designate the legal power of the king, of the authority, let's say. According to these readings, the inscription has been interpreted as a juridical document in which the king issued a decree concerning the inhabitants of Curion. So the text is, however, damaged, and its interpretation is mostly based on reconstructions. Therefore, it is difficult to establish whether the population had any role in decision-making, as, for example, had in Idalion and in Kition. But why were the Idalians mentioned inside of the Idalian bronze tablet as Apotolise et as Italiewese, so the city of the Idalians, whereas in Curion the population seems to be called Damos, in this genitive plural, let's say. Meanwhile, we also have the term polis attested in Amatus in the late classical period, so the polis of the Amatusians, and the Paphos as well in the late classical period. So were there a difference between the Cypriot polis and the Cypriot Damos? So clearly the difference does not depend on the chronology, since the Italian bronze tablets and these documents should be dated to the late archaic early classical period, or classical period, let's say. But new interpretation of the term tamoterone might provide an explanation. The king decided among the damotero, or on behalf of the word damotero. In ancient Greek, the term damos indicates not only population, but also territory, or better, part of the territory, a district. The territories of the Cyprus city-state were subdivided into geographical areas, and the Italian broad standard clearly shows that. Very likely, they were also subdivided into administrative districts, as, for example, they are attested in inscriptions from Lapetos. So therefore, the Curion Damotere may have been representatives of the population of the local territories or district called Damoi. So not surprisingly, Damos has this meaning also in Macedonian Greek, to which the Cypriot dialect is very close. Also, this would be an explanation why we have a genitive plural here and not a genitive singular. All in all, although different from each other, governing bodies, and then I'm concluding, beyond the king, such as assemblies or citizens' representative bodies, were probably present in the Cyprus city kingdoms, regardless of the language used, as a part of a larger phenomenon involving other city-states under the umbrella of the Achaemenid empires. The Cypriot political system of the classical period, with magistracies and more republican bodies beyond the king, may have been that described in the Kuprion Politeia, probably alongside the roles played by officials employed in the bureaucratic administrative machineries, such as the scribes and their chief. And then I close here. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Beatrice. That was fascinating and a wonderful overview of your recently published work. I would now like to kindly ask my colleague, Maria Iacovu, to coordinate the discussion and